I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities of Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Tom and I can't get enough of all things Britain when it comes to music.
That's true.
Britain, without the United Kingdom, I don't think that like most music would exist.
It's true.
So any chance to get to review a modern British album or British band is always exciting for us. Today we're going to review Kasabian's 4813. Kasabian has put out a number of records. They got pretty popular in the early 2000s and have put out a number of records in 2011. Had a pretty big success with Velociraptor. 4813 is the follow-up to that. Now 4813, that's kind of an interesting album title, and you know, kind of correlates to how long this album is.
Yeah, almost. They
must have completely ran out of ideas of what they could possibly.
It was like crunch time, and they're like, "Screw it, let's."
I got an idea. We'll just slap all of the track links on the cover, and then we'll say what the album title will be. The total length. That is about the least creative thing I've ever heard.
It's kind of interesting though. It kind of makes you think.
Well, it certainly made me I didn't have to look up how long the album was. So I wish every band would do this. We'd have to have some sort of indexing system. Anyways, well, how would you describe Kasabian's sound? Because this has been a tough pickle to really like dive into and understand where they're drawing their influences.
Sure. To me, it's kind of a modern resurgence of this like dancey kind of Brit rock or Brit pop that was happening a lot in the kind of late 80s through the mid 90s. Bands like the Stone Roses, Primal Scream, Blur a little bit, even some Oasis also.
Yeah, definitely Oasis.
But a lot of bands were kind of doing that back then, and it was a really fun sound. And I think that Kasabian really nails it as far as that sound goes. Now, I would say that 4813 compared to Kasabian's earlier work is even a bit more in that kind of upbeat, fun dance vein. I mean, it's not quite as guitar focused. You still certainly do have some guitar, but it's even more focused on the big beats and the bass grooves.
Yeah, what guitar you do here isn't the most intricate. It's usually maybe a melody or something played over and over again and played with a lot of gumption.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily the most complicated thing driving the song. These songs, to me, were all about the mood and the energy.
For sure.
I mean, there's just an electricism about this album. When you put it on, it's just like these songs just kind of build and build and build, and usually have these huge anthemic choruses. And I wouldn't say that this is a super structured album, but they definitely rely on that structure of how they have these verses and choruses, and that chorus is so quintessential to the delivering the energy of the song. And each song does this to some extent. And dynamic contrast is key on 4813. And you hear these guys using they have a keen sense for applying dynamic contrast, big builds and big come downs on a lot of these tracks.
That is very true. This one was a little bit tough for me at first because I found that the sound, while like I said, it's not a bad sound. I like a lot of bands that are kind of in this vein and bands that are clearly influences of these guys. But I felt like at first it was actually a bit of a barrier just because of the way that they were executing it. But the more and more I listened to it, I actually found that I really did end up enjoying a lot of these songs.
Yes.
Part of that, I think, too, though, is actually the lyrics. The lyrics bothered me a little bit. And the lyrics is something that if you've watched our show much, you know that we're kind of iffy on. We like good lyrics, obviously, but bad lyrics typically don't even detract from the listening experience. But
unless they're so bad and so obvious that it just sticks out.
And it really depends on genre.
Yeah.
It really depends on genre. Now, this is a genre where you're very classically going to have kind of some core lines repeated a lot because there is that kind of dance element to it. So repetition is a big part of that. That's not a bad thing, but it means that if you're going to hear the same line over and over again, you want it to be a good one. You want it to be something that's maybe kind of thought-provoking. I think back to what just popped into my head is Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve. Sure. Yeah, I could see that definitely being an influence on this band, and that's a classic song. And there's the line, I can change, kind of over and over again. Yeah, I feel like that works with the whole mood of that song, and it's kind of powerful, kind of uplifting. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for in this kind of music, is something that really vibes with that. And not that this album was terrible in that aspect, but there were some parts that just kind of made me shudder a bit. I'm thinking particularly track 11, eez-eh. Is that how you pronounce it? I like that track in general, but the whole "now we're being watched by Google" line, I found it a little bit tacky, and it actually did detract from the listening experience a bit.
Yeah, and I would say that this whole album definitely, like, it lyrically embraces themes of the NSA is watching us, has like a kind of a middle-class revolution theme about it, and just kind of an awareness that we are, you know, there's puppeteers and we're just puppets and things like that. Like, there's definitely references to puppets in some of these tracks, and really, I mean, the reason why I think we don't value lyrics as much is because I think that it's kind of to each their own about whether or not the lyrical message. I mean, if you're really that into lyrics, just go read prose for Christ's sake. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the content is at some point. Now, it can enhance or detract from a listening experience, but it's not what makes up the core of it. But I could totally see how, like, that repetition could add you know, something musically that would detract away from the song.
Well, and also, I kind of got over it to a certain degree. It's more a barrier to entry for me at some points, but if there's enough to like about the music, then you're going to get past that, and I found that I did for the most part.
Now, to go along with that, though, the vocal melodies on this record are actually quite good and quite memorable. I found that throughout this record, I was interested in what the vocals were doing, and they provided a lot of the melody. Here you have a lot of you know, whether it's, you know, you hear a lot of those keyboards on this record, you hear a lot of fuzzy bass and guitar, you know, nothing too complicated, but it's all produced in a way that provides a lot of ample texture. So everything is like kind of, it just has this fuzz or grit to it. But then the vocals are actually, you know, the guy almost has like a John Lennon-esque voice, you know, in that vein of like Tame Impala or almost, you know. And so like these really sweet vocal melodies are coming out on top of that, and some of them more powerful than others is definitely how they keyed the song up. But really, I found them to be interesting and kind of what sold the songs for me. And it doesn't always sell it completely, but on certain tracks it did. And that's really where my biggest criticism comes in, is I think that this album suffers from track displacement a little bit. There's a disparity in the quality of certain tracks. I thought track 12, Bow, was a great track, but, you know, Tom, you and I both picked Doomsday, we both picked Glass. There, you know, there's a section in the middle of the album, towards the middle front of the album, that's very good, and then it kind of gets a little repetitive after a while. They're just not quite on the same page, the same inspiration.
I also think that this band just naturally succeeds more in kind of the high dynamic range because of the genre. I think that some of the softer, more intimate moments are a little bit more difficult to pull off when they've already kind of lambasted you with this fun, upbeat presentation. It's a little bit harder to make that soft sound come off as genuine and really execute well. And they don't do a terrible job, but I think that that's where some of the moments are a little bit weaker.
And one thing that Kasabian really has always done, but, you know, it's very, very evident on 4813, is that they're taking all of these different British genres, all these bands that you can pick out, whether it's the Beatles, the Stone Roses, whether it's Blur, whether it's Oasis, they're taking all these influences, putting them all together, kind of mashing them up into their own sound. And there's nothing overly original about their sound, except for the fact that they're infusing electronic melodies and dance beats into that. And you hear that a lot more on the back half of the record. You're hearing a lot more exploratory and kind of like just sprawling songs that explore electronic music and its application into British rock. And that's cool, I get that, but it doesn't always work. I did find that some of the longer tracks on this record were fun. Like Treat was a really good song. I got into that song a lot. But, you know, at the same time, when they went away from that, it's like they couldn't make up their mind of what they were truly doing with this record. They just they were so focused on the sound and not the execution of said sound through the songwriting. So that kind of bothered me at times. It did bring me down a little bit. I think I'm at a 79 on this
79?
record.
I'm going to go 76.
76. So that puts us at 78 from Velocities in Music. I'm doing quick math in my head here. And which is a mark of a pretty good album. We wouldn't say that we're in love with it, but we would definitely be recommending it to you. Now, if you're a big Kasabian fan, what was your take on 4813? How has this evolution of Kasabian really hit you and struck home with you? Let us know. www.velocitiesinmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesinmusic. Now, as always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let Tom or I know if there's any records you'd like to see us review on this YouTube channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.